This is a point where I hope that all of the panelists are with us still, engaged, sitting forward, perhaps with your cameras on, because I want you to be part of this. And then I'd like a bit of advice really on whether we've got issues here that can be, could be raise hand issues, or whether we just debate them as a panel. Certainly, I would expect people, if I'm going to show these slides, I need maybe Ed, I could ask you to keep an eye on what's happening with the Q&A and how people are responding. But I'm going to just show you the three slides so that you can at least digest all three. There's about changing, I think the first one actually is skills to be developed. There's been a lot of talk about, we don't know enough. I've made it 10 on each slide just to help. So our ability to undertake site inspections and undertake scrutiny, obviously something that Simon was very, very strong on and convincing. And this is needed really to give us confidence and ensure the safety of our projects. And then leads on to 2, which is our ability to design leaner structures. The leaner they are, the more important site inspection and scrutiny becomes. And we're looking, of course, always for better outcomes. That can be economic for our client, or it can be, environmental and carbon better outcomes with leaner design. Then there's the being more persuasive. Structural engineers as a whole aren't often designed. We're designed a little bit to be in the background, especially I'd say structural engineers, because we kind of work alongside and often behind architects. But we do need to be better, advocates of change. We understand the science better than most people at the table. And we need, I think, some learning to how to take these things forward confidently. And perhaps to speak outside what we might think is our traditional space. We might think, well, we're only at the table because we're paid to size some beams. But you're at the table. You have a responsibility to bring more than just that. Knowing how to translate carbon savings into money, that perhaps does help you advocate change, but also not just carbon savings into money savings, but also added value. That kind of goes together. We need more expertise in, I've said here, alternative materials. I mean, timber isn't that alternative, but it was mentioned as something that people don't feel they're skilled enough in. Low carbon specifications, even of traditional materials like steel and concrete. Construction processes, which goes back to these site inspections and so on, understanding that. And the nice term building anatomy that came up, and understanding how to appraise existing buildings. There's a lot of new expertise or old expertise that we need to bring forward again that I think has come up in the conference. Being better informed about the economics and value outcomes of projects, not only about the carbon that was in item 4, but wider issues of economics and value. So we need to kind of understand more than perhaps traditional structural engineers are taught. We need to understand the potential of a circular economy approach. What does that mean? That can help us, again, be more persuasive and advocate change, and understand whole life of projects, whole life carbon and whole life issues. There was talk about offsetting, better understanding of offsetting, something that clients will be wanting to do. There are plenty of debates about whether a lot of offsetting, I think, is dangerous and phony, and it's always robbing someone else of that opportunity to offset. We have to be careful, but we do need to understand it, even if we need to understand that it's not always as good as it can sound. We need a better appreciation of whole life carbon, touched on that a little before in 7, and social environmental impacts of our projects. Very important, this, again, beyond structural engineering traditionally. And we need to know, I've just put this one in, the IStructE plan of works came out just a few months ago. Does everyone know about it? It does talk about our engagement right the way from stage 0, right the way through to site. And it does talk about sustainability and sustainability plans all the way through. So I listed that. It all came out in the meeting. as skills to be developed that I feel are important. Ed, what do you think?
Well, I've spotted one question here, which is around these skills. So a number 11 suggestion, which is to better understanding of historical structural forms, materials, assessments, and construction techniques.
Okay,
which maybe is a
got
sort of
that
subset of number 5,
Yeah, to
perhaps.
save me going beyond 10,
Yeah.
I take the point that building
Yeah.
anatomy was supposed to be that, and then the appraisal of existing buildings, which I do think is a very underappreciated skill. We'll need more expertise in that. It doesn't have to be everyone has to have that expertise, but we need more people who do have it. Perhaps it's a master's or a specific course.
I mean, there already are specific courses on that. And I guess also potentially it's about companies not being afraid to invite the expertise in. And so, I mean, I said before, we get asked by other people. So we work quite often collaboratively on a project. My best example of really good engineering is a company who realized partway through a project that they had the expertise to build a 15-story tower block. They didn't have the expertise to convert the grade 2 listed scary falling over buildings next door, and they were generous enough to say to the client, this is not our bag, you need someone else. And the client knew us and asked us to come, but it was about the engineers knowing when they didn't know, and they were brilliant. They knew what they didn't know, and they weren't afraid to say, we don't know this, we need help.
They probably thought they might lose money if they went down that direction as well, because of that lack of skill.
Fundamentally, we then, we've developed a really lovely working relationship with them, and we're working with them on other projects where, again, they're taking the new build piece, which my colleagues would love to do, but that's okay. It's appropriate that they do the new build bit and we do the historic piece.
Yeah. And there's a little bit there about this idea of alliances and deciding who you want to work with, because they have the same vision. Other firms which have a similar vision, maybe they've declared already, but they're known for some other expertise that you don't have, then work together on this.
I think it takes a level of confidence in your own expertise to be able to invite someone else's expertise in.
Yeah.
And not be frightened by that. And I think that's, if we're signing up to this, we are almost by definition, we're the confident leading type of companies. And we have a duty to help other people feel confident and not to step on their toes either. I mean, one of the reasons that we work very, very well with this company who are Birmingham based is that I have never said to the client, oh, do my colleagues could do the new build bit. That would be terribly rude.
Yes. Very good. So, Ed, shall I go on to the next slide?
Well, there are a couple of other points just come through here that I might just highlight. So one other suggestion for additional skill is understanding the role that the engineer plays in society to influence outcomes, e.g., lobbying MPs, responding to consultations, and getting involved in local projects at a planning level to get better outcomes, which I think is important. Again, I'm not sure whether that's in here somewhere.
Later in the institution area, but I'll put that down. I won't try and do it live on the screen as this is a slide, but yeah.
And the other point I've noticed, I think it's a really good point, is about much better handover and O&M information. If we have a new build, we must convey a robust and accurate design philosophy that factors into the handover information. So I think there's maybe 2 points in here. One is about us needing to provide better information so that our buildings can be repurposed in the future, but also maybe not just kind of thinking that once a building is complete and open that ought to be the end of the story for us. There's a kind of post-occupancy component to this that we don't really have very much to do with at the moment.
There's a big problem there, if I can just jut in, and that is anybody who's tried to work on a building that's got O&M information will know that the as-built drawings are not as-built drawings. They never are as-built. They are always wrong, and that is another reason why we've got to have better scrutiny to make sure that they are proper as-built drawings.
Are there any other comments from the panel? You know, I appreciate you know, this only covers a third of the area, but about the skills.
I have one point, Mike, which I didn't pick up. Maybe I missed it on your run through, but it's to do with sharing. I think we all made a commitment to be open source in how we operate in, you know, in the context of this arena at least. And I'd question whether we're doing enough of that. And you know, we're in the same boat as everybody else, so we should all be kind of recommitting maybe to share more stuff. And I think Margaret made a good point about, you know, smaller practices, you know, maybe needing more information. And I think a lot of that is being provided by the material that the IStructE is producing, but I think we as consultants can be more generous maybe in terms of fueling some of that material as it's produced.
Yes, I think this is very important. It comes on the next slide really, when we're talking about practices and how they need to change their behaviours. But I agree, and it's a tough one actually, because it goes against, you know, the traditional competitiveness. Usually the institutions have acted as that kind of buffer for us, as you know, they are a place where we share our good works and proudly publish, you know, our best projects and so on. But sometimes it's sharing the dirty linen as well as the well laundered stuff. Ed, shall we move on?
Let's do that. Yeah, I can't see any other comments here now on this one.
So again, listening to everything that was being said, I've tried hard not to kind of add in bits. You know, changes in our practices, you know, the noun, our firms. This came early on, really, with the first presentation. You know, about having a practice-wide vision, strategy, business case also came up. You know, that deals with the future and how the practice will transform. If we're just sticking with our same old vision, our same old strategy, our same old business case, which doesn't recognise climate emergency, we will never transform. So that's clear, and it was important. Set a clear action plan based on that. You know, you can't just do that alone. You need an action plan, and then you need to be reporting on that in a measurable way, setting year-on-year targets for that. Building in social and environmental value into that vision and into the impact of the firm. Again, that is then reported on. Seek good employee engagement, potentially. Liberate bottom-up change. There's a heck of a lot of our you know, of the employers of a firm, however few or many there are, of real excitement, anxiety, and a desire to improve skills and have more of an impact to help the lot of the planet. So use that, and I thought it was really great to have Ailsa's comments on what they're doing at Expedition with the B Corp, and she says there's a tool there which I've not really dwelt on at length, which might just give us a few hints. It doesn't mean you have to convert to a B Corp, but I'm sure that will be encouraged. But look at what they say. Invest in the upskilling, some of these things that the first slide talked about. And this is including bringing in additional specialist skills, which was something that Margaret just talked about. That, you know, you develop these internally or you bring them in. Don't be shy. There's clearly new stuff that needs to get into projects. Mandate as a firm, you know, the carbon consideration into all projects. I thought this was a really interesting thing that came up. I think it was Margaret who says every project report now has a passage or a paragraph or maybe a whole section on carbon. But I've added here, put it into the annual business reporting too. So it's not just your project reports, but how the business reports itself. After all, if it's done line 2, it's set measurable targets. They need to be reported on. And then I said, have the courage to align with the right clients and help those clients realign. You know, if you can always take an old client and have a go at helping them see the future as different from what they might have imagined. There's a lot of talk about scenario planning now. Investment is coming, which is looking for long-term investment. It needs to know that these projects, these development projects, will still be valid and healthy. I mean, they may be underwater, or they may not be able to deal with the climate change, or they simply may be poor investments because they symbolize the wrong thing. So we have to help our clients more than ever. I put down here when the discussion turned towards the question about what are the big issues. You know, being prepared to turn down projects is in there somewhere. We turn down projects because you know you're building more better projects with more of the right sorts of clients. You know, shifting your business. Working with clients and contractors to agree ways to incentivize sustainable innovations. That was something that Nitesh came up with. It clearly works for him and in previous projects, so something we should be doing. Develop client relationships, allowing you to offer more. I kind of touched on that, but you know, we can do more valuable things if we don't think of ourselves as only being able to talk about pure structural engineering, and start to develop those services, maybe bringing in other experts to be able to do some of that, but widen our scope. And then a lot of talk about alliances, allies, building teams with other professionals and clients who support our aims. That's pretty much builds off 9. So those are the things I was picking up from what I was hearing. But the third one, you know, it's important that we think about how can the institution help support this. There's a lot there was about upskilling and training and so on, and then there was a lot about practice change. So I've put here, there was a lot of important talk about going further. I mean, praise for how far they've gone so far, the standard measurement of carbon that's now clear, but turning that into what I've called here a kind of plug-in carbon counter, some simpler tool that people can all use, available free for all, which then I think would help give us a database. It's actually line 3 here. Start to build a database and help us in line 2 set an evidence-based set of carbon targets across the industry. There's already a paper coming out which Will spoke to, but about carbon targets, and we're already very keen to get clear targets set. But as we get more data, we'll be able to be you know, even more rigorous and get this embedded into practice. So then 4, this thing that came up, you know, about sharing data and sharing successful processes. I must admit this came back up last year as well. Finding the best way of allowing firms to open source share information is something we've not yet managed to crack. But there is work in progress in the background as to create a way of firms to be able to share things. So that there's a big vote, I think, from the conference so far to progress that. Exercising some influence on standards, design loads, of course, came up massively, and the need for structural engineers. You know, when we're seeking net zero targets, we've got to have a little bit more leeway in the processes that we use for our design, because these standards were introduced before that became a thing, and we now have much more powerful tools and more accurate measures, notwithstanding the point that it doesn't always happen on site, so we do need to scrutinize site works. And then the institution exercising further influence on policy. I did say brackets with others there, but it overran. You know, I don't think the institution as a voice on its own is necessarily always loud enough, but working in tandem with the other institutions like RABB, like the Royal Academy, talking carbon tax, talking about, as we were here, about the carbon area or plot ratio targets, talking about reduced VAT on reuse projects, and also not forgetting what was mentioned, incentivizing the higher standards that Michael brought up. Also, it was brought up raising government procurement standards, again, where government can set higher standards. These are things that the institution's already at the table talking about, and this, it came up again. It's now encouraged to do more of this. Influencing research and encouraging research in technologies to reduce waste, improve accuracy of what's built, and getting things right first time. Influencing the education scene, partly there's about the upskilling, of course, and providing the necessary CPDs and training, but also out there in what does a curriculum for structural engineers really look like. The Joint Board of Moderators has done huge good work already in this area, but that's very, very important that we understand the role of the institution. It has great power to have an impact on education. Influencing the stages of work. I already mentioned the new report on work stages. Using that influence, encouraging more people to work at early engagement stages of 0 and 1, and side engagements are misspelling. That's late engagement, or engagement at the end, site engagement, in fact, which came up certainly in terms of the scrutiny on site. So that's all set out in the Plan of Works 2020, and I think the institution can be emboldened to push that harder. And then finally, the line of CPD. What are the standards that we set for membership and CPD? Rolled those into one. I particularly underlined here in my own what I'm hearing is without site experience, perhaps we're not going to be confident enough to make the leaner designs and to put them in practice, and to know that they will be put into practice without site experience. So there's something there, I think, as a message for the institution. So those were the 10 that I captured, because I think a lot has come out of the conference in the speakers. There's a wonderful breadth of speakers, and that's brought out some important things. And it was really interesting to hear Michael from the other side of the Atlantic, working away on very, very similar themes. But I think, in a way, having, successes in some different areas. So a lot to be learned. So it's definitely the institution, the IStructE and the SEI, apologies, over in the US, are getting closer and closer, working together on climate emergency issues.
I would just add to that, somebody was talking about pushing each other. To be quite honest, from my standpoint, we see what you and Will and the group at IStructE is doing, and that's really motivating us. I mean, we don't want to be left behind. We want to do stuff, and we want to, So I just want to put it out there that there is an important collaboration, hopefully developing between IStructE and SEI on the climate front, because you're pushing us, we'd like to push you a little bit, right? So we'd like to just sort of do this together. So yeah. I want to thank you for your leadership on that.
Brilliant, thank you. And that's in a way what some of the comments here, that were coming out of the conference of finding the right allies, finding the right alliances. When you're working with, if you concentrate your efforts with people who have similar visions, you can start to pull each other, and you'll benefit from each other, and the businesses will benefit as a result, because you do challenge each other to do better.
Mike, if I can just interject there, I sort of liken this in a way to the sort of journey from drawing board to BIM, in a way that you have some early adopters and you have others say, well, that's never going to take off. But it's like that journey, and we all need to make that journey at our own paces. But I think by some of us getting together and perhaps sharing best practice and the benefits, that we can draw others in on that journey.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I think, we've got here, I'm sure online, we've got a lot of small practices, medium-sized and larger practices. And these things apply across the board. In fact, I think the smaller the practice, the more you really need these these alliances and people to work with. And I think that is something that we'd like the institution to be able to help happen, create those alliances. Perhaps it's just member to member in a regional group meeting, but out of that member to member, they're part of two small practices. They can start to see, well, we ought to be talking to each other, sharing skills. And a little bit like Margaret said, somebody may have some fantastic skills in, say, lean design in concrete. Another would be about reuse of old brick buildings, and you can come together and win a project, let's say, by being together.
We already have the small practitioners panel, or we
Yeah.
used, and that. So if the climate change panel could talk to the small practitioners panel, maybe there's something really sort of startlingly useful in that conversation.
Well, we'll be meeting tomorrow.
Relevant and usable.
Perfect. I think we have an engineering leadership group meeting tomorrow, I think, where we do the climate task group does get to sit in the same room virtually as the small practices panel. So we can talk about the conference.
Can I just add to that, Mike? Just thinking about the RIBA Sustainable Futures Group, which I'm part of, we have some non-members that are part of the group. So there's a couple of engineers that sit on it, as well as clients. I don't know how the IStructE sort of climate change panel works, but just getting that diversity is quite useful.
Yeah, we ought to have someone on there, definitely. Thanks for that. I'll pick that up. Well, and I'll say it here that I know that Martin Powell, who's the chief exec at the institution, has been talking very positively about wanting to have have stronger policy statements coming from the institution, which could then be used in alliance with other institutions to seek change. And with as has been mentioned at the conference, the COP26 event next year is helping draw government attention towards big policy shifts in the environment area. Obviously, COVID has a huge draw on their attention, but there are definite signs that this will be a significant event in November next year. So we're all gearing up for that. So any from the rest of the panelists, really, while we're here.
Yeah, can I add something, Mike? Could the 3 times 10 is quite a big list, and I'm just wondering whether there's a few things in here that could, really have an impact, because I think and should be really drawn out and focused on, and maybe even kind of upscaled in their ambition.
Yeah.
Because I think time, we're all aware time's ticking. And yeah. I had a thought about the offsetting one, actually, because I think it's a huge issue, and it's a huge kind of cop out for people, and it just shunts problem round. And whether the IStructE could be kind of proactive in this area. And the example I drew on was the British Land one, where British Land have clearly said the 10 or 15 pounds that you can buy a gold standard offset isn't enough, and but we'll do that anyway, but we'll set our target at 60 pounds, and we'll use the rest, we'll use the residual to decarbonize kind of British Land existing stock, which I think is it's a really kind of whether it's challenging enough you can argue, but it's a really positive thing to do. I just wondering whether the IStructE could do something like that. I don't know, almost imagine you accredit your frame, and you, as part of that, you have to hit a target, and what you don't hit you offset with an IStructE offset, which is part gold standard but part funding for the IStructE to do better stuff in this in this field.
That's certainly an interesting proposal there. Yes.
it could well, you know, you get a badge for your structural frame, which is a big piece of the embodied carbon, actually.
I think I mean, I'm with you. I think offsetting has become for too many firms. I think it's an easy get out, and you know, it's the same when you buy an air ticket. You know, they give you an easy get out because they don't want to lose your custom. But not enough of it is authentic and truly gives you know, value back. So it's here to stay. So there is room for the institutions, you know, not just the IStructE,
Yeah.
to enter the space. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Well,
I was just going to say, I guess one of the things we can do is, you know, like you say, it's not, offsetting's not going away. And, you know, net zero clearly involves some way of balancing books. And until we work out how to design structures out of, you know, entirely reclaimed products for basically zero energy, we will always need some form of offsetting in some description. So I guess the bigger question is, what is acceptable? And that's both types of offsetting and amount of offsetting in my mind. You know, is there an acceptable limit beyond which, you know, you're using too much energy in the first place, you're emitting too much carbon in the first place, and therefore no amount of offsetting will ever, you know, sort of make that politically okay. Yes. Is there work we can do in that area to guide people towards maybe what an acceptable amount of offsetting might be at this point in time, and obviously then where to go to do that well?
I think it would be good if we could get one or two papers in the structural engineer that start to discuss the topic and get it on the agenda, if you like.
I agree.
So look, I noticed that the agenda itself said 12:40. In my head, I said 12:45 that we were logging off. There was perhaps a little buffer there. But I'm very aware of the fact that we've now hit our dead time. I'll personally say thank you very much, everybody. Our speakers have been fantastic. They've said a heck of a lot in a short space of time that they were given, and a real variety of approaches, partly because of their experience and the scale of businesses that they're in, and so on. So I hope as an audience you've found this really helpful and informative. I hope you'll also feel that you've made some friends. I'm absolutely sure that any one of those people that were speaking would be delighted to hear from you in whatever means and medium you choose to connect. Those that have raised questions, I'm sure we will be chewing over those questions later. So please do, you know, keep an eye out month by month, week by week for what the Institution of Structural Engineers is doing. If you're members of the institution, of course, you know, the institution is there for you, and we'd also be interested in your thoughts and contributions. So just before I say farewell, Will, Ed, anything you'd like to add before we close?
I'll go first so Ed can have the last word. I mean, the consistent thing that's come out to all this today has been about staying in touch and collaborating, whether that's with clients, contractors, architects, other engineers, whoever it is. It's about recognizing that this is a problem that we can't solve by ourselves in our engineering silo. So all I would leave as my final words of the day would be stay in touch, please, with all of us.
Perfect.
And I think for me, you know, having been in both sessions, both days of the conference, I think that together it covered both halves of the problem. And I think there is the kind of what we can do now on projects, and then what we need to keep an eye on in terms of that bigger picture. And I think it's been really great in those two sessions to kind of see the whole to see the whole challenge in front of us. So yeah, thank you to everyone that's contributed.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, everybody. Whatever your time zone, Michael, and keep a lookout for the what I think you'll be able to pick up a recording, recommend it to your friends, etc. Thank you very much. Bye.